Hello, everybody. I've been trying to give you some way of looking at contemporary art, at pictures that are being painted right now, by showing you some of the things that the artists themselves have been looking at, well, for the last 50 years, which is quite a time, not each artist looking that long. But these things have been a part of our knowledge. Because around the beginning of this century, everybody seemed to turn away from the kinds of things which were familiar. And the whole history of the Western world, which had almost seemed to be exhausted by this time. And the artists were a part of that turning away from the immediate past and turning away from the familiar past. They were a part of it because the artist is always a part of his society. There's no possible way this is a truism, isn't it? We all are, and we have to be. There's nothing else that we can be except a part. And the artist is sensitive to the same kinds of questions and the same bewilderments and the same difficulties and the same excitements that all of us are. And his art always has to have something which really belongs to us because it is made in our time. And this period, that is the last 50 years, represents a great change. If I may make a little schema for you, that here's the artist in 1900, what he did and what almost everyone did in trying to think about the world or to understand the world. They went right straight back in a line. They went right straight back to the Renaissance of the 15th century. They went past that to Greece and Rome in a perfectly straight line, you see, thinking of history as coming down like a great single stream, and thinking of it furthermore as, in a way, really progressing all of this time, getting better and better and better. And that the kind of development which was the classical world was continued and perfected and increased in its superior qualities right on down to this year. Now, but at this time, there is really a break, which is not, I think, exactly, of course, in the year 1900, but it's a break of the beginning of the century. And one of the things which it does is destroy this idea of a single straight line. And as the artist, as everyone else, turned away from that kind of direct heritage, and instead of going back along this stream, he went into all directions, moving out in the world in as many directions as possible. To do what? Well, to explore, to find out things which he felt could be found out by turning to other men, to other societies, to other forms of life and other forms of art. These things which everyone else was really doing at the same time. That is, all the people who were concerned with the kind of new discoveries of the 20th century were making the same spreading out movement. Psychology begins to turn toward the children, exactly as the artist turned toward the children. And psychology begins to try to mine the child's imagination and the child's action in order to do what? You see, in order to understand the grown person, in order to see what it is that man is. And this is the great exploration of the 20th century, is to try to find out what is man. And one of the ways is to see what man has imagined, and what kind of an image he has made for himself at what different times. Now, the artist turned to African sculpture, not with the same attitude with which he had turned to ancient Greece or to the Renaissance, but with a new attitude, trying to find out what it was that made this the kind of powerful statement of the imagination of man that he felt it to be. And so also does the anthropologist. See, this is the same period when you begin to have all of the writings about primitive peoples, all of the writings about the tribes of the Pacific, and all of the writings about Africa and about Alaska. The whole thing is throwing out a great net of knowledge in which you hope to catch everything, man's imagination, man himself, all these works, and draw them into you, and look at them and examine them, and then say, what is man? Now, the artist has done that exactly as the scientist has done it, exactly as the psychologist, the ethnologist, the anthropologist, all these people who are studying the different parts or the different aspects of man. It may be that you don't like his conclusions. It may easily be that the conclusions which the artist reaches that are dependent on these explorations are not very pleasing to you. And they certainly will not be if you also want to return in a straight line through the Renaissance and to Greece. If you feel that this is what art is and this is all it needs to be, then you will certainly not be pleased. You may also not be pleased by what others have discovered about man, others as well as the artist, in this period, this 50-year period of exploration. But what has happened is that we have enormously increased at least our knowledge. I'm not sure that we have increased our understanding of man, but we have enormously increased our knowledge of him. And it is now possible for us to know things which would have been impossible at an earlier time. And I brought you today just a few of the books that come directly out of this kind of thing, which is a 20th century thing, directly out of this exploration. If I were talking to you, if this entire situation that we're in could be set back 50 years, we would have entirely different books on this table. Because, not because these are recently published only, but because they belong to this new exploration, an exploration of the farthest past. Here's a book on the cave paintings, which I showed you, and this is an extremely full, rich, and fully illustrated one of all of the cave paintings, all from Paleolithic times, from 50,000 BC. That is one instance. But not only that, people have turned with this new interest to things that before that really meant nothing to people. And the artist turns then with these new eyes to such things as the Orient. And because he sees this, his work is different. And I show you these things in a way. Here's some, I think, extraordinarily beautiful themes of mother and child. That's one of the themes which you have seen in a number of other styles. Here's the mother, in a way, tossing her child up in the air. Unfortunately, this is broken and the child's head is broken off. But here's another. These are from India. Now, the interest that the artist had in trying to expand his knowledge, in trying to move out of the confines of life as seen in a single great stream coming from Greece, is part of the reason behind these books. It's part of the discovery of such a thing as this, which belongs to Mesopotamia. And here's a book entirely on one section of Babylonian development. And here, one of the great areas, remember that this is a search on the part of the artist to know what man is and what his world is. And it's a search also toward or trying to discover or to uncover that quality of depth of feeling, of something like honesty or sincerity, something that all of us are searching for. And the artist perhaps searching more diligently or more desperately even than anyone else. And it is to primitives, not alone primitives of Africa and of the South Seas, but primitives of the Western world, that is the works of art which were made by early Christians with this crucifixion. And here's another one, if you can see both of them. Here you have almost no skill. You have very little of that quality that we spoke about, that quality of beauty immediately apprehended, of the suavity and gentleness and grace of surface. There's almost none of that. There is instead this bluntness, this intensity that is here in Christian art showing itself just as, I think, just as effectively and perhaps even more effectively than it shows itself in African work or in other primitive works. I mean primitive from not the Western world. Sometimes it may be bluntly. Now you see, this is not a contemporary. This was made very long ago. It was made in Europe. It again comes from a Christian world, but one that is in its infancy. And its infancy in terms of its skills, its infancy in terms of the kind of sophistication and polish that by this time the artist wants to break through. You see, he wants to break through what he considers to be the surface of life. Whether it's a surface in terms of just a duplication of the actual surface, or whether it's in terms of surface of the technique, striking through that to the heart of the matter, striking through it if he can, and searching throughout all of history, throughout time, throughout all space, for those works that seem to him to have that kind of depth of feeling, that kind of unaffected, vital, even almost magic quality. And he searched and he found. And when he found them, he could not possibly fail to utilize them. And if you see something which looks like this by a contemporary artist, it looks like this because, not because of some whim of his, but because he feels in that the kind of strength that he is aiming for, that he is trying to find. Maybe you say he hasn't found it, and maybe he hasn't. But as a member of the 20th century, he must look, and he will. I'll see you next time.